it's it's 21 past hour, wherever time zone. So I think I should start. So first, any immediate important HDF related questions from people who attend this live? All right. Not, then I'll talk about what I intended to talk about, and that's I thought to maybe give a little overview about what lately, and by lately I think maybe last, I don't know, 7-8 months has happened regarding the support for cloud data access and HDF5 library, and maybe mention what's sort of in the pipeline in the, again, next couple of months, couple being undefined right now. So basically the developments in improving and enhancing the support for cloud data access in HDF5 libraries is incremental, but I would say meaningful. So there has been really time or resources to make some significantly quick improvements in some fundamentals, but what's been done, I think, in my opinion, really targets some important capabilities that can help those who are using HDF5 or accessing HDF5 files in the cloud. And again, not knowing who is going to watch this video, there is no right capability, not right in a sense that you could modify an HDF5 file in a file system. That's not possible in a cloud object store. So when we usually talk about cloud access to HDF5 files, it's only read-only, only read-only. So first, what's been done? Let me share this. I think this is the one. I tried to pull a list of closed issues on the HDF5 repository, and I apologize, but I searched for the author me, so it's highly subjective choice of issues related, but I think I'm kind of the one that's complaining or submitting these issues regarding cloud access. And so these are the closed ones, not all of them here. They found 6, but I don't think all of them are here. So one that, oh, there you go, we have a date as well. So this was in March this year. So what happened is these library functions that provide chunk file location. And this is very, very critically important for some methods that do not use HDF5 library for accessing HDF5 files. So I discovered that basically if a file has a user block, those functions were not going to report the accurate chunk file location in that case. Essentially, these functions behaved like the user block did not exist. And so this was fixed. And it's not, so everything I'm saying when I say fixed, it means it replies to the latest release of the library, which is 1.14.4. So that's also, I forgot to mention at the beginning. So this is now fixed. So whenever there is a user block, the chunk file location now will take into account the user block size and therefore correctly report chunk location. The other thing that also was done, and this was a result of some studies, is this little requests during file open. When the same file is in a file system, nobody cares. This happens in microseconds. However, when that same file goes into an object store, then each of these requests is tens of milliseconds. And so that was fixed. And the way it was fixed is that actually the read-only S3 virtual file driver, which is the native driver of the HDF5 library for accessing HDF5 files in S3. It now essentially caches the first 16 megabytes of the file. It just grabs it on file open and keeps it for the duration the file is open. And so that obviously helped to avoid these small requests, but also now can help in some other scenarios where a very important internal metadata information is in those first 16 megabytes, and so reduces the overall number of S3 requests to the file. And when we talk about cloud optimized access, it always comes down to make as little S3 requests as possible. There is no other, that's like rule number one. Rule number two, of those few remaining, parallelize as many as possible. And if you kind of do those two things, that's basically what cloud optimized access is. And so, so this is now possible on file open, library, and rostry VFD if it's used, caches these first 16 megabytes. And the reason I'm saying if rostry is used is because, again, there is a way, especially for Python users using H5Py, that rostry VFD is not used. Instead, there is another Python package that I had video some months ago called fsspec, that it can be sort of put into the same role as the rostry virtual file driver, but it's not exactly the same because that fsspec package and the library don't really talk to each other well. And so it's not possible to benefit with these things directly. That's fixed now. Next, yes, this is also now possible. What was this all about? Again, there is some backstory, too long to talk about it. I think in January of 2023, I made a video about cloud optimized files. And one method for optimizing them is to create this paged file, or files created with paged aggregated file space management strategy. It's a mouthful. And so in those cases, if you had to work with these files and the benefit from them, you had to enable this page buffer that the library had. However, in diverse data environments, the environments where data are coming from different data producers, nobody's know which file, HDF5 file is maybe paged file, which one is the traditional file, all those kind of things. The library is now capable to take this page buffer size setting. And in case of a paged file, you can benefit from it. In case of a traditional file, the library is not going to raise an error anymore. So in other words, you can sort of set and forget this page buffer. And then, if you happen to work with a cloud optimized file, there will be improvements. If you don't work with it, at least your application is not going to crash completely. Again, there are 50-50, is this good or not? People who tend to do a lot in cloud computing, they tend to be kind of don't want to mess with these low-level settings. They just think things should work one way or the other. So I think this is going to help them. For the real experts, obviously, they would like to know if their file is not cloud optimized and have some kind of an error, but we'll see how this goes. All of these things are really available. I'm not sure how many people are using them a lot because honestly, cloud optimized HDF5 files are not so easy to find in the wild. It's kind of a new thing. So we'll see how all of these things are going to be adopted by the users. The next one, which I think is useful, yes. So this is the one. This is the most recent one, and essentially is just now an extension of this capability that I just talked about page buffer. So this now brings the setting of page buffer to the command line tools, like h5dump or h5ls. Because again, the library itself does not come with the preset page buffer, so you have to set it yourself. And this brings these options to these command line tools. And I'm going to show you this. This is a nice introduction to my next segment, which is the a little demo. Well, demo, but show how this works. Let's change in sharing. So I'm going to share now. Yes, this one. So I pre-ran these commands in advance because some of them take quite a long time. But basically, I used a paged aggregated file that I just talked about. So in other words, it's a Cloud Optimized HDF5 file. It's a satellite, NASA satellite data file from ISAT-2 mission. And the file itself is fairly interesting because it has a lot of data, and it's kind of, it's one of those cases that were really difficult to, really bad for cloud access. And so we studied a lot to see how we can improve these things. And this page buffer size setting is available to HDF dump. It's available to HLS and HDF stat. I have not tested all the other command line tools. I just basically use these three. So I use them. However, even when you use them, there are different user experiences, if you will, of user interface. For example, in HDF dump, in order to say that you want to use ROS3 virtual file driver, there is this command option. If I want to use the same thing in HDF-LS, the command line option is different. And I just found out yesterday that HDF-stat completely doesn't have support for either of these two options for ROS3 VFD. But if you're using S3 credentials, which you don't have to use now, but that's the only way I found for HDF-stat, then it will use the ROS3 virtual file driver, and therefore it'll work for HDF5 files in S3. So I think this is where we could, definitely improve the user experience. And so, but long story short, I ran these things, and as you can see, I ran them with on the Cloud Optimized file only, but I chose to turn off, not to use page buffer. So in other words, this is more typical of a typical HDF5 file. Whereas if I turn off the page buffer, then it was the Cloud Optimized kind of version. And I tried to compare the difference in performance. And I chose 64 megabytes as the page buffer size. And the reason why I chose this number is because in these paged files, the Cloud Optimized HDF5 files, the internal metadata is in pages, and the page buffer, which is able to store all the pages with internal metadata. So another page buffer that's large enough for all internal metadata gives you the best performance. You really don't want to, again, have bigger increasing number of S3 requests just going for internal file metadata. And so I knew ahead of the time that this file would fit within 64 megabytes cache. So that was okay. But other than that, that's the only reason why I chose 64. So anyways, you can see running HDF dump and saying, give me all the attributes and their values, plus all the storage settings of this file, of groups and data sets and everything else. But I don't want to get the data from this file. It took 24.5 minutes if it was non-Cloud Optimized HDF5 file. Again, the reason why I talked in that video in January 23, why is that? So I'm not going to go too much into detail. However, once you turn on this page buffer and have all this internal metadata in these file pages now, you go down to essentially 8 seconds. And the same theme repeats for all the other tools. HDF-LS, 2 minutes and 45 seconds, again with the page buffer, 6 seconds, and HDF-stat, for example, almost 12 minutes, for sort of typical file situation, and then only 6 seconds, just under 6 seconds for the optimize. So this is now available. This capability about these command line tools is available in the development branch. This is not anymore, not in the release. Again, I forgot to mention that earlier. So this is not available in a release. This is going to come in the next release. But I just wanted to show the improvements. Now, again, with the command line options, obviously there's some work to be done to harmonize them. But other than that, page buffer size is working across all 3 tools, and it's actually having significant impact if the file is cloud optimized. Any questions? No. Is there a chat? I can't see. No chat questions. Okay. So with that out of the way, I think I can stop sharing and then probably talk about what to come. So these command line tools, they're in develop branch, but not in a release. So that's that. And now we can go to the issues. And as I mentioned, I reported this HRI-STAT command line option situation confusion already. I just mentioned it. So here's the ticket for it. Wow, priority only low? My goodness. How come that my issues are only low? I have to talk with some in the company. Other than that, let me see, there are a couple of others related. Yes, so this is another one that I submitted, which essentially tries to change the way how S3 HDF5 files in S3 are referenced. So right now, as I said, this ROS3 virtual file driver, it only works with the actual URL of that object. In other words, something like this for the file. However, people really use S3 URIs very mostly. And so we need to find a way to enable ROS3 VFD to actually accept that. So there is this ticket that I submitted for this. So hopefully, we'll see that also added at some point. So that's coming. The other issue is, here, I think there was another one. Hopefully I didn't miss it. Yes, here's an idea. I tried to see how that goes. This is, as far as I understand, we're still for discussion. So right now, all these settings that I talked about, these page buffer sizes, again, also dataset chunk cache sizes, they're all expressed in bytes. And with my interaction with users, I kind of noticed that all bytes are obviously understandable and people know that. However, when people think how much page buffer size or how much dataset chunk should be, they tend to kind of think about, well, how many pages or how many chunks I want to keep in these caches. And so I submitted this issue to basically, can we also have configuration that says, I don't want page buffer of 64 megabytes. I would also like to say, I want to have page buffer of 8 pages. However those pages are, but 8 pages. Because maybe conceptually, it's easier for me to understand that I'm storing 8 pages rather than a certain amount of megabytes or bytes. So we'll see how that goes. But that's something that, a possibility exists. And obviously people who like it or not, they can come here on this issue and try to leave some comment or opinion. We didn't turn it into a discussion. No, this is an issue, but we can see if that's more appropriate eventually. And the last one that I'm aware of, that's still sort of related to cloud access, is this one. essentially enabling the Raspberry VFD or all the library command line tools and things to actually work with the AWS specific environment variables. And this is a good example. What I talked about, for example, see this user actually, see this is the actual URL that you have to use currently with the library, Raspberry VFD, and all the tools if you want to access this file in the cloud. However, I want to turn it into an S3 URI that we talked about just now. And also, this user would like to use this kind of AWS environment variables as many other tools that work with the AWS S3 are already supported. So this is the, I think this is it. Really. I'm not aware of any other ticket right now in a library repo that sort of is clearly beneficial to the to cloud access. Well, actually, maybe the last one. Oh yes, absolutely, there is one actually. Not related to S3, but still, I think useful. That one is support for zlibng library. The zlibng is another open source implementation of the zlib compression library, and there are some reports out there that it's faster than the old zlib. And so again, the HDF5 library in the development branch now supports building the HDF5 library with zlibng. And this is kind of connected with cloud data access because one of the ways that helps optimize HDF5 files is to make chunks bigger in size, in bytes. And so any compression method that's faster when decompressing these chunks that are now going to be bigger can definitely help. How big those chunks are, that's another story, but there are some applications that are going into the several megabytes or so for each chunk in bytes. So definitely compression and the speed with which the application can decompress those large chunks, I think that's going to be the next chapter in improving performance for cloud access. And that's basically all I had. Open for questions, for comments, for discussion. Corrections if I said something wrongly, although I rarely make a mistake, but it's possible. So anyway, that's it for me.
Aleksandar, this will go into the next official release?
This being
everything that you said was in the development branch now. You said that it will go out in the next release.
That's a plan, but Dana could, he's the he's the decider.
If it's in develop, it'll be in the next release.
Okay.
And so of the things that Aleksandar showed, the AWS environment variables and the S3 URLs, both of those should make it into 1.14.5, which is the next release in September.
Okay.
I'm seeing the interest in this, Alex, from the from the climate weather modeling, these kinds of folks, especially people who aren't necessarily dealing with clouds, but have object stores that are compatible with them, min.io and other things. So I think there's interesting things to be done that are cloud object interfaces, but aren't necessarily in the cloud too, which should be something to keep on the radar.
Yeah, so mostly what I have experienced with so far is actually the NASA Earth Science experience and issues because they decided to go all into Amazon Cloud.
Right, right.
And so they're right now, I think about 56 petabytes or something already in the cloud. And I think one of them future missions, which is, I think, supposed to be launched, but then there was some problem with heat shield. So it's back to the factory. I think they will, within 3 years, dwarf anything that completely the entire NASA satellite archive of all time.
Yeah.
And they go straight to the cloud. They're not going to touch anything else.
Well,
So
lots of
so
time.
that's where I'm getting all
people
this
are-
feedback.
Yeah, sure. It's really valuable. No question there. I was just saying that, you know, when people are doing, for example, machine learning locally on their own, you know, systems, then accessing that kind of data is the kind of data they want, but they have to download it all, you know, in order to have reasonable access times. And so one of the popular choices is to go stuff it on a big object storage system locally too, but those interface with S3s. So I think at least, you know, we don't want to lock into everything is in the cloud, and things that aren't in the cloud still use the S3 interface.
Yeah, that's correct. No, yes. S3 API and compatibility is bigger than just AWS. Yes, you're correct. All right, I have a question in the chat. Says, while adding capability to use AWS environment variables, would it also be useful to add capability for using the credential file, the AWS credential file? Yes, that would be great, if possible. However, parsing the text-based file is, I think that I'm not quite clear how that, you know, who would be doing that, because whether or not the library would be enhanced with a parser of its own, or it would be a library dependency, a build or whatever. I don't know. That's, I think, his decision how to implement it. But yes, that would make the actual, it would make it exactly the same user experience like many other tools that work with the S3. Comes to credentials, then environment variables, and finally the application. And out of all these resources, you finally get with the choice of all the required pieces of information. All right, anything else? All right, well, if not, thank you for joining. Obviously, if anyone who's watching this video and they're trying or thinking or actually accessing HDF5 files in the cloud, then definitely, and you have any issues, I think reporting them on this repository would obviously help. And yeah, contact the company, forum, email, you know, say your experience and your needs. That's the best.
All right. Thank you, Alexander.
You're welcome.
See everyone back next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.